You are listening to a Fangirls Going Rogue priority transmission.
All team, give it everything you got.
It's time to fangirl flail with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Count me in. I don't think there's anything more important in the Star Wars universe than the fans.
News, discussion, and commentary from the female point of view.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
With your hosts, Teresa Delgado, Tricia Barr, and Sarah Woloski.
Boy, am I glad to hear your voice.
Strap in, because this is where the fun begins.
I like the sound of that.
Hi, I'm Tricia Barr.
And I'm Sarah Woloski.
And I'm Teresa Delgado, and this is Fangirls Going Rogue's review of Rogue One, A Star Wars Story.
This is a spoiler alert. There will be spoilers for the movie Rogue One, A Star Wars Story within this discussion. If you do not want to know what happens within the plot of the movie, please turn back now. Press pause, come back later after you've seen the movie. This is a spoiler warning. All right, ladies. Let's go. Let's get into it. What were your overall thoughts?
Oh,
Right?
Who wants to take that first? Sarah, you go.
Okay. Well, my goodness. First of all, this movie, it surprised me at how emotional it made me feel, even from the very first kind of jarring opening, actually, because you're used to that Star Wars font coming on with the big Star Wars note, and instead you got something different, and it was jarring, but in a good way, I think. And because this movie touches so closely A New Hope, which is most of our first experience, at least my first experience with Star Wars, it just made me so nostalgic and emotional throughout the film, really. And it was a bit more intense than even I thought it would be. So I think those are my very, very first impressions, but we'll dive deeper in a little later.
Well, I kind of have to mimic a little bit of what you said, Sarah, except for the opening. I went into this with the same mindset that I had when I saw Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which was, this is a film in the Star Wars universe, but it is not a Star Wars saga film. And so I was actually really looking forward to what they would do with the opening, because I kind of felt like, well, maybe they'll develop a new way how they're going to open all of these Star Wars story films, but I don't think they did that. I think they left the opening to where it could be done many different ways with, depending on which film it is. The opening for this, though, it was very Lion King for me, is the analogy I have for it, because you saw a bunch of stuff and then you saw the actual Rogue One title scene, kind of like in The Lion King, where you see baby Simba and all the stuff, and then it's like, boom, Lion King. It was kind of the same thing. Although I did notice it sort of felt like a nod to A New Hope, with the Star Destroyer coming in over the top of the screen, and we're seeing I didn't know what it was at first. I didn't realize that. I was like, is it a ship or what is it? But it ended up being the rings of this planet, and it was just so gorgeous. I was like, wow. And then that very opening note with the music, and it's just like, boom, there's a planet on your screen. And I was like, okay, all right.
Yes.
Sure, whatever. But it was just like, okay, I'm not ready, but I'm ready. My overall impression of it, though, was just how amazingly beautiful it was. It's weird. It's a war movie that's gorgeous, if that makes any sense. But and I just remember the feeling I had the entire time, which was, this is Star Wars. This is Star Wars, as I was watching it. And I didn't have that reaction, that same feeling, that feeling of being home watching a Star Wars movie, when you just feel like, this is my world. I didn't have that when I saw The Force Awakens. I thought I did, but then this came out, and that's not what it felt like. So I'm kind of confused.
I had the special, I get to also see it at the world premiere, so it's all surreal in the moment. So I kind of, when I came out, it was very strange, just the whole experience. So you have to kind of sit back and go, wow, what happened? One, it's just very sumptuous to look at, despite the very dark tone of it. I mean, people who worried that they were going to Disneyfy it, don't worry. That did not happen. It's very emotional, and especially by the third act, it's driving forward, it starts going, and then it's kind of relentless. So you kind of had to I felt like I had to take a breath for a minute, because once you get in that third act, there's nowhere to take a break and really process what's happening. So I sort of came out of it breathless, if that's the term I could use. But I have to say, this is one of the prettiest movies I've ever seen. You know, we talk about the prequel trilogies and they're lush, but this one's different. It's very real and beautiful at the same time.
I agree with you there. Yeah, lush is a great word. And same with the score. I think Michael Giacchino saw some of these beautiful scenes and just decided, oh my gosh, this is the perfect time to swell the orchestra. So there's so many moments where there's these gorgeous long shots and establishing shots of planets and things, and the score swells and you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. I thought it was great.
Yeah, well, let's get into that really quick, since you brought up the planets. Something that they did that was different from a lot of the other movies is that every time we went to a new planet, we got the name of the planet down in the bottom left-hand corner, which I thought was really, really cool. Now, there was one time that we did not get the name of a planet, and we were sort of left to our own devices to decide what that was. How did you guys feel about that whole, sort of naming all the planets so you knew where you were? And then what were your thoughts on what the unnamed planet is? We'll start with Tricia.
Well, I felt that this established the scope of how big the empire was and how big the problem was in the galaxy, and to bring all those planets in. And we usually have a couple planets and a couple locations, and this one, it kind of gave you the breadth of the universe and what's happening and establish that. I liked it. I had heard some people who were like, oh, why did they do that? People would know that's the Rebel Alliance headquarters, but not everybody necessarily would. Or, some people, the prequel trilogy is their movie and haven't seen Return of the Jedi. So this really establishes this is where the rebels are. This is the, quote, secret base from the scroll that this movie is derived from.
What was, I'm not remembering when they didn't name a planet. Was it when Darth Vader? The scene of Darth Vader and Krennic?
The very first, yeah, I guess so. But no, it's the first time we see Vader when he's in the Bacta tank, and they do not name the planet. However, I have learned from Anthony Bresnikan and listening to Ion Cannon's podcast with their review that he said it because it was spoiler free. He said the planet you think it is actually is what it is. So I'm just curious if you guys had that in your mind going in of what planet it was. I know what planet it is, but I'm guessing y'all know what it is.
I didn't actually think too hard, because I was just kind of stunned that we saw Vader without all his parts.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wasn't thinking that at all. So please enlighten us.
He's on Mustafar.
Oh, because of is that one where they showed? See, I've only seen it once, so it's hard. That's where the lava was.
It was all the lava and stuff.
Okay.
And they kind of go to this really tall, creepy looking building. It's pointy at the top, and then you go in, and he's in the Bacta tank and stuff like that. But yeah, that's on Mustafar.
Okay.
But they didn't name it, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, why aren't you naming it? We know where he is. Although it is kind of weird. It's like, why is he back on Mustafar? Is there a connection to Vader and Mustafar other than the obvious? Or is that where Darth Vader's house is? Did Luke just inherit a house on Mustafar?
He takes visitors on Sunday at Mustafar for tea and an occasional choking on your aspirations.
Yes. Oh my God. When we heard that line in the theater, Richard and I turned to each other and we said, okay, that's going to be the line. It's going to be all over. Everyone's going to be quoting it. That's so amazing. Well, let's talk about Darth Vader a little bit and how he was used in this film. How do you guys, what did you think of how he was used in the film?
I thought it was good. I thought it was just enough. It wasn't too much. I didn't think we were going to really see him all that much. So the amount that we did see was pretty good. every scene he was in to me felt like it came right out of like a really terrifying horror movie.
Appropriately scary. I mean, that's what he's supposed to be. And we always say that if you see Darth Vader and he's against mere mortals, that it's going to be devastating. And certainly that happened. I feel like I need to see it again. I don't know if that whole sequence where he's, trying to get the plans, if it's it's very kinetic, but I couldn't tell if it was more kinetic than, say, Rebels has been very careful to stay close to A New Hope Vader and how we see him operate. I know he's throwing a lot of people around. So in some ways I was like, is it too much? But then, a lot of it was him using the Force to throw people around. But I did go, well, if he could throw everybody around, why doesn't he just grab that thing that he wants? And that was my moment where I was like, well, if he's just throwing people around, he could have just used the Force and there's my thing and we're done. So that kind of was a little bit of a plot hole moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, I need to see it again for sure. But there's two things I really remember. And the first thing was that his chest piece area or his shoulder piece seemed to move a lot more than it normally does, I guess. I don't know. It was like when he was walking, he almost walked with like a swagger that Vader has never really had. And I was like, okay. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But then at the end, when he lights his lightsaber up and he just goes like bonkers, I was like, oh my God. I was trying so hard to not scream at them and to scream at the guys. I was like, just throw the plans through the door.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Even though, of course, I know the outcome, but I'm just like, seriously right now. So
yeah.
It's like, you're going to die.
I thought that was amazing, that ending, scene with him. It's like, oh my gosh. And yes, Trish, I think after the fact, I realized, he could have yeah, exactly, grabbed the plans with the Force or did something else with the Force, like maybe the Tantive 4, could he have controlled that himself, But I gave it a pass just because that was so amazing to see him move like that in live action, because we've seen a little of that in Star Wars Rebels, but this was so different. And because this movie is darker and the war film and rated PG-13, I think it was a little more brutal than we've ever seen him.
We did all say on a previous episode of Fangirls Going Rogue that we wanted to see the end with the Tantive 4 and Leia, and we all got that.
Yeah. Now, okay, so here's my question: Did you like seeing Leia's face?
I did. I thought it was fine because I didn't know what they were going to do, and when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, cool!" I think it was a perfect mix of they lingered on it long enough, but not too long.
I was fine seeing her face. I would have been fine if it was somebody else. I mean, it wasn't going to bother me, and it was just for a moment. It was actually the Tarkin part that I felt we saw too much of him, because I started to go into feeling like I was looking at, as one reviewer described him, zombie Tarkin, and I felt like there could have been less happening and maybe less there. Just him turning around the last bit and saying a line, because it was fine when I first looked at him, but the longer I looked at him, the more I was like, okay, this is kind of, it's not a matter of, can you do it? Yes, you can do it. Should you do it is another thing. And I know they apparently had Peter Cushing's estate's approval, but I still feel like, Mon Mothma was a different actress, and I don't know. It pulled me out of my suspension of disbelief after a while. So I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm liking this or not.
Yeah, I kind of felt that way about Leia almost. Like, I almost wish we would have just seen the back of her head or the back of her hood, and she would have never turned around, because that was the one, like, just cheesy part, in my opinion. I mean, I know she's, we're bringing home that message of hope, but yeah, I don't know. I didn't want to see her face.
I would have been fine if it was just the hood. I would have been fine.
Yes.
If that was all it was. It would have been enough for me, and then to see the Tantive 4. So, yeah, they tried something. I don't know if I'd want them to keep doing that. I'm fine with different actors or just getting we know that she's got it and she's running with it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
that must be Leia.
I think they need to understand that, like, the fans we know that Peter Cushing's dead. Right. We know that. And we know that Carrie Fisher isn't, 19 anymore. And so we can accept a different actor and it's not going to be terrible, and I think they need to come to that realization. And I agree with Tricia that the longer they were on Tarkin, the more it became a little bit odd, but it didn't pull me out the way that it did for Tricia. I don't know. Maybe it was because I don't keep up with all the spoilers and stuff, so I didn't know if it was CGI or if it was a different person with makeup on or whatever. I didn't know, so I wasn't thinking too hard about it. But I did, when they showed Tarkin's back for the first time, I was like, is he going to turn around? Is he? Oh, he did. Huh.
Yes, me too.
Isn't he dead? I was like, I thought he was dead. So I got a little confused initially.
Well, how about one actress that is a character who is different as Mon Mothma, although is the actress who would have said some lines for Mon Mothma in the prequel trilogies, but just got to be her in the prequel trilogies. I thought she did a really good job. I felt like Mon Mothma had the weight of the rebellion on her shoulders. What did you guys think?
I agree. I thought she did a very good job. Her voice is like spot on. And I think it's great that Mon Mothma and Bail Organa were used sparingly, just like Darth Vader. And yet that's what kind of ties it to the other films in the universe. So I think Rogue One did a great job in balancing that, our known characters with our new characters like that. So I thought she did a great job.
Yeah, it was cool to see Jimmy Smits just when he showed up in that little moment. And then, to hear him say, I've got somebody I can trust, and that part. So those connections were really fun. And overall, the cast definitely, we knew that they were all good, but I thought that they all really brought it to what they were given in the script, and as far as working for their characters. How about, did you guys have a favorite of the new characters?
Well, yeah. Sorry, I had to mute my mic for a second. But just really quick on Mon Mothma, I really liked her, and she had this really cool one moment where she sort of made, like, when she smirked when they said, there's rebels on Scarif, and she sort of just has the smirk on her face, and I was just like, okay, that's the badass face of like, yeah, that sounds right. I loved that. And but as far as like the new characters, I didn't really know, because I had sort of kept myself from getting attached to anybody, because in my mind I was like, well, they're all going to die. Is what I told myself going into this movie. It helped me accept that I probably was going to lose everybody I liked. And so I just sort of let it come naturally. And when it did, it ended up being K2SO and Chirrut Imwe, which I've been reading from all the reviewers are like everybody's two favorite characters. So now I'm kind of like, well, maybe it's not really. I don't want to be like everybody else. And so I kind of want to see it again and see if it changes. But Chirrut Imwe just blew my mind. Like that whole monk thing, and like being really into the Force, but not really being a super Force sensitive person. There was just something about him that struck me, and like it was like I understood him. I'm not really sure if that makes sense, but K2SO for me was just so freaking funny. Every single time he opened his mouth. I mean, it was stuff like, why aren't you on the ship? I got bored. Okay. And he's like,
did you know that wasn't me?
And he's did you know that wasn't me? Or then he says, there's a lot of explosions for two people that are trying to blend in. And then, oh my gosh, the other one, when they go to go and get the Death Star plans, and there's like an Imperial officer behind the little, I don't know what they call this, like the little panel, the little round panel thing that he was standing at. Just the control panel. Yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah. He just walks in and he's like, you can't be in here. And he's just like, yeah. And he just hits him on the top of the head. I was like, dang. Like, savage.
Well, yeah, that question, it's interesting that you say, so we're going to go into spoilers here, obviously. So when Richard and I were sitting in the theater, there was a picture on the screen of 6 of our main characters. Jin, let's see, Cassian, who else? We got Chirrut, K2SO, I think Baze, and Bodhi. Bodhi, yeah. So all those 6 were up there, and Richard was like, okay, place bets. Who do you think is going to live? And I was like, maybe 50-50. So like 50% would die. Yeah, I was wrong.
Yeah, you were wrong.
Like, everyone died. Okay, so, but the death that struck me the most, and I guess that's what denotes my favorite character, was K2SO. And he's like trying to save off the Imperials from finding Jin and Cassian, and he's doing everything he can, even though he's getting hit by more and more bullets. And I was like, oh, how sad. No, not you, K2. And then he died.
His death reminds me of Boromir from Fellowship of the Ring, when he finally is like, I'm going to protect Frodo. And the orcs are shooting him with arrow after arrow. And he's just like, ah.
Or, you know what that also reminded me of was, well, you guys don't watch Game of Thrones, but Hodor and Hold the Door. Oh, it's the very same thing. Oh, okay. All right. Not quite as heartbreaking, but I think so. K2SO, I think, would be one of the characters that'll definitely stick in my head. What about you, Tricia?
I think the Chirrut ended up being my favorite character, and I thought Cassian would be from when I saw the first 28 minutes, and I liked him, and then there came, I don't know, there was something, I felt like there was a little bit of, they were struggling a little bit with motivating Cassian and Jin in the overall plot, but Chirrut, I've had people actually ask me this, is Cassian just a terrorist? And, he talks about the things he does, and he hasn't done good things in the name of the rebellion. And in a way, he is a terrorist. He's very willing to he kills rebels on 2 occasions. 2 different occasions
that floored me right away.
Yeah,
like, that floored me. That one of our main characters was like, wait, was that him that just killed that guy?
Yeah,
like at the very beginning.
Yes.
I had to ask Richard for confirmation. I'm like, wait, what? And that's how this movie is like more gray than black and white. Like the other
definitely. And then he shoots the rebel who's going to throw the
yes,
down and might get Jin. And I can, okay, he's trying to protect her. He needs to protect her. But then Chirrut, to me, he represents the Force. Like, he trusts in the Force, and we hear that from the mother to Jin, trust in the Force. And so the Force kind of gives you the blessing that this is something they have to do to survive. And I think ultimately the story is about survival. Even though they don't survive, Jin is a survivor, and the Rebel Alliance survives this story. And so Chirrut is the one that kind of gives you all right, this is okay. The Force allows him to actually do what he's going to do. That's what I believe in his ending moments is his whole little mantra where he's believing in it and trusting in the Force, and also gives this sort of notion that if you believe in the right moment, you can harness the Force and do something. So, and I thought Donnie Yen just did a really good job with it.
Well, I can kind of think when it comes to Chirrut, I don't know, his death to me seems sort of like not as amazing as it could have been. And I know he's not like a huge Force user or anything like that, but it would have been really cool just for me if when he died, if the Force had sort of said, you have believed in us so much that we are going to absorb you into the Force. Like, that would have been beautiful. Like, it just would have been such a really cool spiritual moment to see the Force accept him as one of their own.
I never even thought about that, but that's kind of a neat idea. A little bit of spin on Force philosophy. So how about the music? I'm sure Sarah wants to talk about it. I know Teresa does too. So, Sarah, you touched on a little bit. Anything particular that struck out to you beyond that it was much more impactful, I believe, than the Force Awakens music?
Yeah, well, okay, so I won't have time to really analyze this until I actually get to listen to the soundtrack, which comes out on the 16th, unfortunately. So I plan to listen to that over and over again and then watch the movie again, of course. But from the things that did stick out, it was in that very opening moment, you get the blaring note like you have right before the Star Wars, what is that? The main theme, obviously. But the main theme did not play. It was a little different. And then it went into a solo flute, I believe, which is the same thing that happens in A New Hope, but it was a little different. It's just, it was like turned on its head 180 degrees. So I really like that. And there was some moments that, like, you know, there's specific original John Williams themes, like the Force theme played in a certain moment. And, you know, that brought a tear to my eye, as the Force theme does. And he used the Imperial March. Now, I don't know about using the Imperial March, just because technically the Imperial March hasn't been invented yet. In my timeline, because Empire Strikes Back is when the Imperial March debuted. What did you think of the use of the Imperial March?
So, you know what? I didn't really pick up on it as much. It's weird for me. This is one of the reasons I want to see it again before I buy the soundtrack, is because I feel like I want to see the music attached to the movie one more time before I just start listening to it. And I was so tempted to buy the soundtrack, but I caught little things. Like, I caught the use of the Force theme, but I didn't really catch as much of the Imperial March. But what I will say about the music that I caught is that it did at times make me feel like I was watching one of the newer Star Trek films. And I know he's the same composer, but I caught there were some things, just a few subtle things, like sometimes when we were in space and things like that, that it sounded kind of familiar to the very first Star Trek that came out.
I can hear you.
I don't know what year it was.
2009. 2009.
Okay. Oh, she knows. Yes. And so there were some little things, but overall, I thought the way that he used the music was amazing. What I loved the most is that the cinematography and the art and, like, the characters and the music, they fell in line together so smoothly, and sometimes even more smoothly than in The Force Awakens. It was really, really cool.
I definitely agree with you there, in that there were some moments that reminded me of Star Trek. And there were some moments, and this is one thing I want to get into when I can actually listen to the soundtrack, where there was some call outs to the Rebel theme and the Trench Run music from A New Hope. But once again, he was just, like, playing on the themes that John Williams had. He wasn't exactly mimicking them. So I really want to play those two side by side and be like, oh, look what he did there, you know? But it's definitely clear that Michael Giacchino really knew what he was doing, and, you know, he knows the Star Wars universe. So I think he was definitely the right choice.
Well, it also blew me away with what he did with the music, that it went so perfectly with the film, and that he was able to pull that off in like a month. Like, that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up, like, breathing Star Wars music, so I think he probably just exhaled it in one 4-month period.
Nice. That's the way. Yep.
That's sort of how it felt, you know, like it was almost like, okay, I've been waiting for this my whole life. I don't have too much time to think about it. He didn't have time to overthink it, and he just did what he felt the movie was. He had noted that he thought it was very emotional. I thought he brought that to it. I did a couple times, like Teresa said, felt like I was in a Star Trek movie occasionally, so I had that too. But, you know, you hear a composer does enough stuff, you start hearing things. Even with John Williams, sometimes you get that feeling. So in that doesn't surprise me. But the music definitely helped carry it. How about the X-Wing battle, the space battle, the whole battle in and of itself?
Well, now we know why Red 5 is available for a call sign. Just saying.
We knew that was happening.
Yeah. But I lost it. That was one of my major moments where I was just like, oh my God, this is Star Wars. Ah! Like, I was screaming inside. Very quietly screaming. Yeah.
Oh, we were actually kind of screaming. I'm sure some of the reviewers in that theater didn't like us very much, but we had made sure the people around us were Star Wars fans, so it was okay. But yeah, I thought it was like you said at the beginning, Tricia, this film, it was just a frenetic pace for that third act, and between what was happening on the ground and what was happening in the air, like, and then you see so many ships that are familiar. And one thing that blew me away was the Mon Calamari cruiser, and the calamari admiral, I guess, in charge, and his awesome seat with the glass floor. How cool was that?
Well, he definitely could see the whole situation unfolding.
Yeah, no joke. I mean, that was so cool. But you know what was really interesting to me is that at a certain point towards the end, I was like, okay, we're going to get a cameo here and a cameo there. And there's a Mon-Cal ship. And so there's going to be a, young Admiral Akbar that like sticks his head out and he's like, says something clever. And no, but I was like, dang. And then I swear I had my fingers crossed because you hear, all right, so let's get into the stuff with Rebels for a second. There's so many Rebels tie-ins, and there is a moment where you hear, like calling General Syndulla, and I heard that. Oh. And then I was like, is she going to, when all the ships started reporting in, I was like, she's going to say something. She's going to say something. And then it never happened. And I did get sad.
Oh. I didn't hear that about General Syndulla. I'll have to listen next time I
actually know who said the line.
Who was that?
David Collins, because I spoke to him after the movie. So he said, yeah, that was him.
Yay!
Yay! So he also said he's a voice of one of the trooper stunt actors who's needed a little bit better sound for when he died or around then. So, we have...
That's funny. And also David Collins got to speak with Michael Giacchino on the red carpet, so that was fun.
Yes, it was.
Like, yay!
It was fun. They played that whole thing while people were sitting down, so we got to see the live stream. Yeah, it was playing on the
that's
screen.
Cool.
Otherwise, it would have been kind of boring sitting there for an hour without your phone.
Yeah. Well, Tricia, there's one more Rebels Easter egg that you told me about that I'm going to have my eyes peeled for. So you want to enlighten our listeners?
Yeah, I did. And I didn't catch this. There's two. The ghost is in several of the battle scenes, so you can, and people have highlighted it. So they said if you look pretty much at any wide shot of the battle, you should be able to find the ghost. And also, Chopper is in the hangar. I think he's in the left. You can see him briefly. And there's also a shot of the ghost on the ground at the Rebel Alliance headquarters. So the ghost and General Syndulla and also Chopper do make an appearance. So we have quite a few things in there. And if you haven't caught them all, that's okay. Neither have I. But there were people I'm like, I don't know how your eyes are that fast, but they caught them. People can see things like.
Well, crazy. And also as far as the Rebels connections go, if you stay until the end and you watch the credits like me, in the additional voices, Steve Bloom did additional voices as well as Vanessa Marshall. So I reached out to Vanessa to find out who she was, and she was one of the girl Rebel pilots.
Oh, nice.
As the voice. I don't know exactly which one, and she hasn't seen the movie yet, so she couldn't tell me which one it was. But as soon as we find out, we will let you guys know.
Awesome. And also, let's talk about some of the other Easter eggs, like towards the beginning of the film, in the kitchen, you see right blue front milk. And center, blue milk. That was awesome. I thought it was funny how it was like great. Right in the middle of the frame, too.
Well,
it's like they panned in on it, like, look.
Yep. Yeah, they talked about that camera has to be very specific where it focuses, so that is part of it. But even the way that Homestead was designed and the circular way that we see in A New Hope, I thought that was very familiar. I mean, although it's a very different looking scene, right? You're in dark sand, and then you actually have plants, and he's a farmer also. And then the homestead looks the same. You have the blue milk. It's all inverted in a way. It's dark and the colors of so they took something. A lot of people complained about The Force Awakens that it was too on the nose with the desert planet and whatnot. And this one was how I would like to see more of them, where things are very familiar, the way the homes are, but that that it is different and it feels different. And probably even in the way that Scarif was this really beautiful world, and the colors all of a sudden changed and looked very different than anything in Star Wars. But it was a beautiful setting for that. That felt very like World War II, like they were, storming a Pacific island or something.
Yeah, from the Pacific. Yeah.
You know what's fun about that is the whole Scarif planet, because that's what you end on at the end of the film. Richard and I were driving home, and we're in LA, and there's palm trees everywhere, and I kind of felt like we were in a little slice of Star Wars universe driving home. So that was neat. But what were you going to say, Teresa?
Oh, I was just going to say that, people have been comparing this film to like part Saving Private Ryan, part Band of Brothers, part The Pacific, all done by Tom Hanks, may I just say. But but it's true. There's a very strong Band of Brothers feel, I think, and with The Pacific, and it's not gory violent, but it's definitely violent enough that, if you're talking age group of kids that should be seeing this, I think as long as they're 12 or 13, they're fine. But really younger than that, it's up to your discretion, like as a parent. But I would go and see it first, just because many kids want to attach to a hero and they expect their heroes to live, and nobody lives.
Right.
So that makes it kind of hard. And especially if they really start to like K2SO, I mean, he dies in a pretty violent way. I mean, it's not gory, but it's pretty bad. And, it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's really cool, but it's not over militaristic. Like, it's just enough with it's still feeling Star Wars-ish,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And then, again, with the whole gray area, like Cassian Andor, killing people and things, he's supposed to be a hero. So that kind of, not that it rubbed me the wrong way, but I just would be careful with little kids.
I think you have to be, if you're going to take your young child, if you know that they'll be able to handle it, you still may end up with some questions about,
yes,
because he does kill people that are supposedly on the good side. And there are some of the rebels who are, they even make a point of saying Saw has become too militant and he's caused problems for the rebellion. And we still see that Bail and Mon Mothma are trying to come to this somewhat through a peaceful solution, and that they want to take Galen to the Senate to testify. We know from the beginning of New Hope that the Senate's been disbanded. So, that this battle sort of ends up breaking it. All hope of diplomatic solutions are gone in this. But, so that's the part. Did you guys have... Was the whole plot, the idea, because this fixes, how did the rebels figure out that how to destroy the Death Star? So they give us a solution here that's pretty convoluted in the hologram that the holo message that Jyn gets from her father, and she's the only one that's seen it by the time they take off. Did it work for you? Did the fact that he had designed it in and related, did that all work for you, or thoughts?
Oh gosh, that to me, it seemed like, well, of course he would have put a failsafe in there. But my only problem with it was when Jyn was telling Krennic about it. My father put a something in the Death Star that's going to make it blow up. And she's telling him this. It's like, don't reveal your cars. Don't lay them on the table. Why are you telling the bad guy this? Because then they can fix it. So that's the only thing that bugged me about that part. Was anything else? Or do you guys have anything to add to that?
I didn't think about it too much. I just sort of was like, okay, that's cool. That makes sense. I like it. I don't know. And it's like I just had gotten done reading Catalyst. And so because of that, I was very in the mindset of, okay, this is exactly what's happening. And I was good with it. But can I just say, read Catalyst. If you haven't done it, read it. Because it's,
I'm almost done.
It sets it up so perfect. Like this book is like, the perfect lead in. And it's just, it was great. It's great for me anyway.
I felt that scene in and of itself was emblematic of the weaknesses in this movie. The weakness in this movie is that a lot of times when they wanted to tell you about what was going on, it became these long expositional moments in a very fast, in the way that New Hope doesn't have that in those long that includes the Tarkin scene, all the information he relayed in the hologram. It was a long bit of information. And then there were other moments again when Cassian finally revealed who he was. Jyn talking back to Krennic And so sometimes they had to resort to a lot of exposition. I believe it was because they were trying to fix things. If you compare, if you've been paying attention to the ads and you pay attention to what happens in this movie, there are so many things that do not happen in that. So it was kind of interesting. So, they changed a lot in this movie.
I agree. Like, I think less than 50% of what we saw in the trailers made it to the movie.
Yeah.
It was
Where's
crazy.
that TIE fighter that Jen goes up against?
Yeah. Yes! On the catwalk. It's like, she's on the catwalk. When's the TIE fighter going to come? Oh, okay. I guess it didn't.
It didn't. So, there were things that could have, I think, done better. And I'll be curious to see how people who aren't huge fans, like, are the morsels in there that we responded to as fans, will the story work for people who just go to see it, who don't recognize the Easter eggs, the things that happen, if they don't remember specific details from A New Hope? So, now that the movie's coming out, we'll see how the average audience responds.
Right.
Yeah, and since you guys are talking about average audiences, and I want to take a minute to kind of talk about money predictions. So on our last episode of Fangirls Going Rogue, we mentioned that it had looked like the film was going to do $130 million in opening weekend just with pre-sales. A report has come out looking at the 5-day projections worldwide, and it looks like they're projecting globally about $300 million within the first 5 days, which is pretty crazy, but it's about on track with what the projections were for early ticket sales. So I am going to go ahead and take a guess that with opening weekend, we're going to get, just from the United States, somewhere between $150 to $160 million in the opening weekend, those first 3 days, that Thursday night into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. What do you guys think?
I think that's pretty safe. If we're placing bets, I'm going to go a little higher. I'm going to say 180.
Wow, she's really going rogue on that one.
Yeah, I am. Why not? Go big or go home.
I think it's going to come in 150 because I think there's going to be a lot of parents who wait a week to take their kids. Mm-hmm. So I think it'll have a good second week when the people decide that either their kids bug them enough that they take them, or they've decided, all right, I'll take my kids.
Mm-hmm. Either way, It's going to be a slam dunk no matter which way you go about it. But, there are two characters and one specific actor that can continue to stay there in every Star Wars film. Which I thought was, well, that's a clever way. He must have it written in his contract. But Anthony Daniels and R2-D2 and C-3PO, obviously, are in Rogue One. And in a really clever way. I thought they did it really well. It was really quick and really funny. But they're really quickly in a scene, in the hangar scene, you hear C-3PO say, "They're going to scare us. Why am I always the last one to know?" And it's just like, ha, ha, ha.
That's funny. Very 3PO. I think just because of the way they're set up in the Star Wars narrative, that were sort of the characters that take us through the journey, that it felt right for them to be in this movie, just for a brief glimpse, but it made sense, especially knowing where they end up in A New Hope. Now, has anybody watched A New Hope on the heels of watching Rogue One?
I have not yet.
No, I watched it before. To prep, I watched Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. So wow. I was planning on doing it this way, though, is that we see it tomorrow night, and then I'm going to be like, A New Hope as soon as we get home.
All right.
Us
that's
too.
My plan.
Awesome.
What about you?
Yeah, I did watch it last night, and it definitely, that opening sequence kind of gives you a little bit more, when Vader's coming in and boarding the ship, you're like, oh, man, okay, I feel a little tense now. Not that I didn't when I was a kid, but, coming off the emotional energy of Rogue One, it felt more like that. And I also do a nice just shout out for a really, really cool way that they made the name Rogue end up being something really important in the Star Wars universe, because it ends up, we know that Luke's squad takes it in Empire Strikes Back, and then in the expanded universe it became a really important name. So I like that this was how they gave it some emotional weight. So whenever we see Rogue Squadron, or it comes out, that we'll kind of feel the importance of what these characters, and they won't be forgotten in our minds.
Oh,
you know,
man, I hadn't even thought about that, and now I'm getting like chills.
Emotional.
God.
So
absolutely.
When they do their Rogue Squadron TV series, we're not asking for much, but when they do, we will remember Jin and Cassian and Bodhi and Chirrut and Baze and K2SO fondly.
And cue sad music now.
Right? They're the rogues within the rogues.
Exactly.
I love that.
And so
you will be in our hearts forever.
Any closing thoughts from you guys before we bug out of here?
Oh, okay. So here I am going way out on a limb here. I need to see it one more time to know 100% for sure. But I have been towing a very, very scary line, which is that this may be better than The Force Awakens. And I am like on the edge of the cliff getting ready to jump off with that. But I'm going to see it again on Thursday. But I am so close. I am so close.
Wow.
So that's enough. I don't need to say anything else.
Right. Huh. That's them's bold words there. So I don't know. Gosh, because this was a beautiful film, and I'm just deciding, and the characters pulled me in. It's one of those I really have to see it more times and really get into it to know, but I'll be interested to actually rank, maybe next time we have another episode, is to rank my scores in order and see if this score outranks any of the John Williams scores. Oh my gosh. We don't know.
My closing thoughts on this is I thought it was a beautiful movie. I thought they did a lot of bold things. I don't think they were bold enough with their gender diversity. I will talk about that until the cows come home. So, and I also felt that for as tight of a script as A New Hope was, and this leading up to it, that the script was not as tight as that movie. They did a really good first act and they started to close it up in the third act, but somewhere in the middle it needed more work. And so that would be my one, knock on this one, is that it could have used a little bit more character driving. There's a lot of things that drive you emotionally as a fan, but I think when people really look at the story, they're going to start talking about some things and go, oh, and I think Honest Trailers will have fun with this one too. So
I look forward to that. Yay. All right, ladies.
Yeah, well, that brings us to the end of our not spoiler-free, but spoilery review of Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. If you want to interact with us between shows, you can find us on Twitter. We are at FGGoingRogue. You can send us an email to contact@fangirlsgoingrogue.com.
And you can find us, let's see, I am at Jedi Tink on Twitter.
I'm at Fangirl Cantina on Twitter.
I am at Ice Cold Penguin, and it's all the same for all of us on Instagram also. So follow us both places.
And if you really want to share your thoughts, we have that nice little voicemail button on our website, fangirlsgoingrogue.com. You can just scream till your heart's desire what you thought after the movie.
Absolutely. So instead of saying yub yub, I think it's appropriate that we go rogue. So everyone, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, go rogue!
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 I rebel.